As a child in his native Netherlands, John van der Water entertained himself by building tree houses. It was a hobby that presaged his later career. As a professional architect, 6 years ago, John formed a partnership in China. The company is responsible for a number of iconic structures built in several parts of the country.
On our way to the Daxing, the Beijing Rose Museum construction site. It's going to be a museum which is the main venue of a World Heritage Rose Conference. There's going to be 39 countries participating. We really try to find some cultural significance of roses in the history throughout China to show to all these different countries that are participating.
With 8 months to go before the Rose Conference, construction is going full steam ahead. John and his partner, Jiang Xiaofei, are conducting one of their regular site inspections.
It's impossible to do it. You can see, if you see that door there, how many steps you need to make from inside go outside. In itself, it's arguably one of the most important museums that's being built in Beijing right now, and that's going to open. And if we would exactly go through the main axis of the building, we would go through the Forbidden City. So it's exactly on the north-south axis. It's such an important building, so it's an opportunity and an obligation to make it better. Have the wind everywhere go through it. It's still very...
Amazing place. I think everybody will take a photo in front of the floor.
Rain is going to fall, find the lowest point, and then there's going to be like the drip line.
Yeah.
Pure feeling. Always remains a little rough.
They need the floor, the top floor.
The difficulty is that a building like this hasn't been built before anywhere. So this is one of the largest stainless steel elevation in the world, and it's difficult because it's not a straight elevation, but it's a tapered elevation. So you talk about a 3D shape that completely has to be made by hand.
The complex steel flower design is a huge challenge. They know they've fulfilled their contractual obligations in designing the museum's exterior. However, the team feel the overall effect has not achieved its full potential. They decided they should stay involved to ensure that the building quality reaches the very high standards they set themselves.
In Holland there's a saying, if you really want to make a good building, you need to add another 100% of energy to make the building 10% better. And that's something we always try to do.
From the construction site, John and Jiang head for a meeting with the local government contractors.
Ideas how to make it better. I want to talk about is the interior construction. If we go to
John is used to the Chinese way of doing things, where an architect must balance the interests of the local government, construction companies, and clients. Often, the challenge is to create a fine building with little budget and less time. This puts enormous pressure on the architects that are feasible and practical.
The next idea we have here is to combine the seating with the landscape itself.
Jiang Xiaofei is a graduate of Tsinghua University. He and John set up their partnership, Next Architects Beijing, in 2010. By that time, John had already been living in China for a number of years, and Jiang was impressed by how his partner had learned to adapt to the very different design environment.
His strategy is just too wide.
John 的最大特点，真正在中国生活了10几年，就是他对一些意向性的东西，他能很快的去领会到，能把这种文化的东西真切的表示出来。比如说我跟其他建筑师、外国建筑师去讲，你需要对一种文化的东西把它建筑化， 但胶案可能这种建筑化之后，就别人很明白啊，这是从中国文化里头来的。但其他建筑师呢，可能建筑化之后你就再看不到了，因为他对你整个文化还是没有一个最基本的了解。
How I think that Jiang and I work so good together because he has a huge experience, a tremendous experience in making things come true.
我会很快的知道业主想要什么，我会给他划定一个比较准确的坐标系，就是你做的东西要落在这里头。
I can very clearly state that it's the only way. There is no other way. If you really wanna make things true, you definitely you must work together. You must have a dialogue with the Chinese people, and that's only good because I'm not building for myself. I'm not building for foreign people only here. I'm building for Chinese people. So if I cannot have a dialogue or some understanding or work together with Chinese people, then it's no use what I'm doing.
The coming together of their very different cultural backgrounds creates a rich breeding ground of creativity.
Tomorrow the important thing is this part. 那个时刻是当时我们做了很多方案，会议室的我们积了一堆的人，然后我就告诉大家，我说咱们做的方案都不行。我们当时很多方案是考虑怎么把它做成一个花的形态，但那个东西呢，我们认为就是它没有一种内涵的东西。我一直就是跟教练在找这个项目的一个跟文化结合点。
So we went back and found the idea of silk, one of the great inventions in China. And then we combined this idea of silk with the tradition or the handicraft of paper cutting. So we paper cut more or less the silk in order to create a space between the closed museum building and the park for activities and for all kind of things that people could use it. And then by adding up all these ideas, then suddenly we started creating a 3D in the computer and we came up with this building. I think this is going to be a big rain. So it's going to be some music feeling going to be in there. It'll be interesting. Still 8 meters. Biggest rose.
人的灵感的迸发可能就是瞬间的事情，就要很快的在电脑里把它一个初步的形态做出来，只有10分钟。
Probably the most beautiful thing in the development of a project is, in architecture you call this a serendipity. So serendipity is you think about, you work something and then suddenly there's this idea of things come together. And I have this moment a lot with Jiang. My Western thinking, and a lot of it is not useful, some of it may be useful, but only if it's combined with Chinese thinking, then this moment suddenly is there, like, this is something which is not Western, but it's also not traditional Chinese, so it's something new. And if this moment happens, that's a beautiful moment in a design process.
The two experienced architects lead a group of promising young Chinese designers. China's rapid construction and urbanization have presented the company with unprecedented growth opportunities. Next Architects Beijing now has a staff of 30 highly skilled and creative professionals who have left their mark on many Chinese cities. The buildings they have designed cover 40 million square meters, enough to provide a living space for 1.2 million people, the population of a medium-sized city. With a particularly strong reputation in the field of cultural design, they're responsible for a number of landmark structures.
Basically, I think their work is very good because they are working on such an important project that architects with the same age in Holland never could have worked on, because these buildings aren't built anymore, nowhere in Europe. So there aren't almost no new libraries being built anymore, new opera houses aren't being built anymore. Museums, of course, are still being built a little bit, so they're working with relatively few experience on very complex buildings. The ceiling, if you have a very wide light beam, then there's going through the barrier and only light up the points there. Museums you got more in Europe, they also try to make the street go in the building. So no need to have like this 5-star hotel, shiny floor feeling or anything in there.
It's said that 80% of Western architects living in China leave within 5 years. No other Dutch architect has spent as long as John working in China. He ascribes his success to his ability to design within a Chinese context and the fruitful cooperation with his Chinese partner.
As an architecture student, one of my professors once told me that the biggest dream for any architect in the world is to build one opera in his life. And I'm still such a quote-unquote young architect, but we are working already on 2 opera houses now in our office. So this is something that has, I have to thank China for, of course, because China is providing these opportunities, but you also need to be able to grasp them as a Westerner.
He came to China seeking opportunity, but as a professional architect and as a person, it was initially hard to adapt.
John was born in the small Dutch city of Del. As a boy, he developed a passion for building tree houses out of wood he found lying around at his parents' home. Looking back, he believes this was when his interest in architecture started. He was the first person in his family to go to college, and after graduating from Delft University of Technology in 1999, he and several other aspiring young architects undertook a global study tour. In 80 days, they visited 26 of the biggest cities on Earth, including several in China, where they were particularly impressed by the fact that the construction of new buildings every year was at the time equal to that in the whole of Europe. In 2004, with 5 years' work on his belt, John headed to Beijing, taking with him nothing but a backpack and a laptop.
Incredible opportunity as a young architect, of course, to come here and to be able to cooperate and to be able to touch on projects which you can never touch on, arguably very late in your career in Europe. So it's very tempting for a ambitious architect.
However, China was not the playground for Western architects he'd imagined. He faced major conflicts of ideas, which left him feeling confused and at a loss.
One of the biggest differences between being an architect in Holland or in Europe and in China is that we are educated, and in our practice in Europe we design from the inside to the outside. So we very clearly know, after lots of dialogues with the client, what they want. And they're not, in the process, they're not going to change what they want. So they want a hotel with 400 rooms, and each room should be this size, and it should be this kind of feeling, and so everything is very much determined. There's a lot of clear constraints. Whereas in China, you start to work maybe on a hotel. And then in the process it may turn into, or it may change into a hotel, or it may change into an office building, and then in the end it may change into an apartment building, and then in the end it may... So in the whole process you need to design from the outside to the inside, because the inside is not fixed yet.
He soon realized that there were differences between Western thinking, Western culture, and Chinese thinking and culture. Still, it was a struggle to have his designs accepted by clients. The first 4 projects he designed according to Western standards were rejected, even though they were, to his mind, very good.
There are several ways to deal with this as a foreign architect, and the most easy way, of course, is to get frustrated, complaining about the building quality and the organization and the process and everything. But then you only look at it from your own blue eyes looking at China. So if you try to understand why this is working like this, if you admit that your way of thinking and your way of working is not the only way, and then if you admit that you try to build in a completely different cultural context, you can actually find space to make your designs better and make your designs come true. But it takes a long time. Especially in the beginning, if you're not equipped enough to design in a Chinese context, it's a lot of hard work and a lot of energy you need to invest in trying to really make projects come true.
John decided he needed to learn, and so began noting down his experiences. The dozens of notebooks he accumulated would later become his book, You Can't Change China, China Changes You.
The material or the background of the book, of course, were a lot of experiences behind this, and I tended to write all these experiences down. So this is just a part of the 5 years experience before I started writing these books. These are all little notebooks which I tended to fill with all different kind of remarks. Sometimes it's just sentences. Sometimes they're like whole conversations noted down, even on air sickness bags. These are some of the airplane tickets of the last 2 years, which I tended to collect. So I really almost like a monk, collected everything, tried to register everything, in order to be able to digest it and try to translate it in something that I was able to understand.
Linked Hybrid is a pedestrian-oriented housing complex near Dongzhimen in Beijing. It was designed by the famous American architect Stephen Holl. John liked the design, so much so that he's moved his family there.
I'm just very proud of my family. This is one of the good things that China did with us. I met my wife in China, and our first son was born in Shanghai, and our second son, this little guy here, was born in Beijing 1 year ago. So we as a family are very thankful. What China gave to us. Basically, it gave us a family.
Their son Maxim attends the local kindergarten in the complex where they live. John's wife is Patricia, a diplomat at the German embassy in Beijing. They met 11 years ago via the internet.
When I met John, he was a typical foreigner, I would say, as we all are. Westerners are very straightforward, and especially Germans and Dutch. So I'm German, he's Dutch. We say what we think, and well, maybe in China this is not the right approach, and this is what changed John. So here in China I really learned to be much more patient and to see a very long perspective.
His parents were at first apprehensive about his decision to start a career in China. But now they're happy to see him realizing his childhood dream.
John always sends his parents pictures, or when there had been an article, and especially his father, he keeps a box with paper, and he's so proud and shows it around. So this is really nice to see that.
Possibly can say that one of the greatest qualities of my parents is that they allowed us to do whatever we wanted to do. And I'm so thankful that they gave me this opportunity just to figure out what I wanted in life, and when I became an architect, what I wanted to do in this world, and how I wanted to understand this world, and where I wanted to live and work. So it's just I can only try to give this to my children as well. That's the biggest thing a parent can give to their children, I think.
Anyone who is trained as a Western architect is naturally reluctant to accept outside influences. John, having overcome his own initial resistance, is enjoying the process of relearning.
In Western architectural education are really programmed, I would say, to have an idea of what is good and what is wrong. But the question is, your own perception, Western perception of good, is not necessarily good in a Chinese context. Many things which I had learned at my university, I had to relearn again in China. Even more things I had to unlearn. And even still more things I had to learn again. So that whole idea, let's say the whole educational background, which in the world is valued as one of the best universities in the world. There are so many things which I learned wrong.
In 2011, John began work on his book, You Can't Change China, China Changes You. In it, he shares his experiences as a Western architect in China. His main conclusion is that you should not try to impose your ideas, but embrace the differences and use them to your advantage.
I would say it's the very foundation of something that Jiang and I now call cross-cultural design. So we don't try to approach projects in China only from a Western point of view or only from a Chinese point of view, but we try to combine them together, and we try to always look from the other side back to let's say the context of the project itself. So we call this cross-cultural design.
For an architect, it's a sublime moment when he sees an idea finally become reality. John and Jiang Xiaofei are particularly proud of their design for the Lucky Knot Bridge in Changsha, capital of Hunan province.
Having successfully embraced two cultures, John began producing designs that stunned the world.
Overlooking Meixi Lake and set against mountains, Lucky Knot Bridge spans meters of the Dragon King Harbour River and is a key element in the development of the new Lake District in Changsha.
So we started designing with the idea how to make the bridge more than just a connection. And then we came up with the Western concept of the Möbius ring. So the Möbius ring is something that doesn't have a beginning and doesn't have an end. We came up with the idea of making an endless stair where people could meet, or people could do some exercises, or that could potentially have some meaning for the public space in which we are building. And when we started sketching, then suddenly the association of the Chinese Lucky Knot came up. After I finished my book, many people asked me the question, do you really think Western and Chinese design thinking can come together? And I actually believe that our Chinese Lucky Knot Bridge is an example that it can come together.
Lucky Knot Bridge won the CNN Award for one of the sexiest projects of 2014. John and Jiang Xiaofei are looking forward to the day when people can linger on the bridge and enjoy the public and recreational space. Opposite the bridge is the Infinite Gate, also designed by John. The inspiration comes from the idea that traditionally a gate is something that closes off. But now cities are so spread out, they have no inside or outside. There is also an association with the Chinese ribbon. Locally, it's known as the M Gate. Yuelu Academy in Changsha was, for centuries, one of China's foremost prestigious academies. In 1926, it became part of Hunan University, and it was here that Jiang Xiaofei spent 4 years of undergraduate study. Today, he's introducing his mentor, Liu Su, to John.
Liu Laoshi, we are in such a historic and cultural place. It's really amazing to be here as a foreign architect. But I see such a discrepancy between this place, this cultural historic place, and the way modern Chinese cities develop. So is there any way to connect the historical or the cultural feeling into or with the modern Chinese city?
过去完全就是以开发建设为主，这些年开始呢转向为要重视保护呢，并不是不建设，它要建设选别的地方，老建筑留着，我在别的地方再建新的。一座古建筑，一片有历史文化的那个街区多保留一些。
John is amazed by Yuelu Academy. He sees it as a beautiful example of how, centuries ago, Chinese people created harmony between man and nature, between architecture and people. Back in Beijing, he addresses a very contemporary issue.
Sustainability, but sustainability. So it's trying to pass on this message that sustainability is doing more instead of doing less. And you need to engage in different kind of dialogues, cultural, You know, there's a myriad kind of dialogues in order to engage in. Related only to
Next Architects Beijing has been invited to take part in Beijing Design Week, a leading international platform for design in China. As part of this year's event, the Dutch Embassy is sponsoring an exhibition under the title The Nurturing House.
Ja, Governors Island is heel bekend natuurlijk. Middag amateurpsychologie en dit.
He's very Chinese. He seems quite integrated, especially in the way of doing business and how to approach a project, a client. What he's been able to achieve with Next in China is quite remarkable.
John van der Water is now playing an active role in Chinese architectural debate, giving lectures and participating in forums. During the Beijing Design Week, Next Architects are visited by the King of the Netherlands. For Next Architects, 3 factors are key to the process of realizing a design in China: having local cultural significance, being realistic, and flexibility. As for John, among his colleagues, he has earned respect for being strict, patient, and pragmatic, and for getting things done.
He has a flexible personality, and I think this is one of the most important things that an architect needs in China: to be flexible, to understand that you cannot know everything, and be able to adapt to the situation.
约翰他从来都是，不管是前天晚上工作到几点，第二天早上肯定是第一个到办公室的。然后像有的时候我会跟约翰2个人去出差，去汇报项目。我们有可能平时都很辛苦，在候机的时候飞机上，都会休息一下，打个盹儿都是很正常的。但是John从来都是在工作。
You cannot allow yourself to get lazy, of course, you know, because it's not like a guidebook. Now I know how to do it, so I'm just going to do it and do it and do it. There's still, you can. That's the beauty with Chinese culture. You can just discover more, discover more, discover. It's like an onion which you can unpeel, and there's no end to this.
The big day has finally arrived. Beijing Rose Museum is opening to the public. It's set to become a new tourist attraction in Beijing. Visitors learn about the history and culture of rose planting in China. John is aware that China is the home of the rose, with the earliest rose fossils dating back 40 million years. And he's very glad that, as he sees it, the rose is coming home.
When I came to China 12 years ago, I was a pure Western architect. Maybe I'm still a pure Western architect, but I've gained some more understanding and appreciation of the context in which I'm working in. As an architect, it's very difficult to be really satisfied because you always see things that can be done better. But still, this has been such an incredible complex building to build. The stainless steel elevation, which is completely new, the limited budget, it's all done by hand. So I see little details that can be better, but still let's say the big overall result, I'm really satisfied with it.
John's greatest source of pleasure is the thought that his designs and the buildings developed from them have transformed China's cities and made people's lives better.
One of the most valuable things for an architect is that your designs actually become true, that they're being built. But making a design and having it actually being realized, there's a long way. You need a lot of people and a lot of trust and a lot of opportunities in order to make this true. And I really need to thank China for all this trust and all these opportunities. Several people once mentioned that I'm almost like living a dream here, being able to design and build so many buildings here. And I hope that I'm able to live this dream for a long time still, because I think my heart is really here.